Hi all you lovely kings, queens, and in-betweens, my name is Elaine, and today I'm going to be discussing Unison League's veteran experience. For those of you who might not know, I've been playing Unison League for the better part of a decade. I started a few months after the game debuted, after receiving an invitation from a friend of mine. Although I've gone through a number of different accounts, I've stuck with 4 of them. The first is Kara, my cleric, the second is Arya, an archer, the third is Donna Noble, a mage, and most recently was Graliest, a lancer who was featured in my video pertaining to the creation of a new Unison League character. When I first started playing, the only classes that were available were the 5 basic classes: the archer, mage, cleric, soldier, and lancer, and they didn't have as many rings as they do now. Although there is a lot more available to me now than when I started, I will admit that I've only dabbled in the remaining classes. This choice stems from 2 main factors. The first is sheer lack of interest in some of them, and the second is the sense that I built all of my girls a certain way, and have gear specifically tailored to their needs, as a member of one of the 5 starting classes. And deviating from that class would reduce their strength simply because I do not have the best gear for any other classes and never have. With the exception of Kara, the game really wanted her to be a lancer for some reason. As I alluded to previously, I've witnessed many changes in the game since I've started playing. I've seen the addition of new rings, abilities, and classes. I've seen a number of layout changes and believe the game looks better now than it ever has. I've seen different spawns come and go, like shared spawns among others, and I've seen changes to event formats. For example, raids aren't what they once were, and there are now new types of events that didn't exist before. I've seen the addition of pets and other features which didn't exist before, and the removal of some, like the transmutation limit that let you turn in some of your gear for a new gear piece. I can go on, but perhaps the greatest and most troublesome change for me were the adjustments the devs made to the main quest line, which is something I've touched on in previous videos. A few years ago, the devs made the main quest line more solo-friendly than it had ever been prior. Before this change, navigating the main quest line solo was a Herculean task, especially for me, a cleric. It was a lengthy endeavor that compelled me to lean on my guildmates and forge in-game friendships just to advance. Frankly, this camaraderie was what kept me hooked. We bonded, coordinating schedules to conquer challenges together and support each other's virtual ambitions. Though many have since moved on to other games like Genshin Impact, leaving our line channel quieter than before, we still keep in touch. I feel like this experience and dynamic is much harder to recreate in the present state of the game. Since you don't need anyone else to progress through the quest line and their difficulty has been scaled back, there's little reason to engage with others. This shift dilutes the social fabric that once enriched gameplay. There's no reason for you to communicate with your guild or other players or make friends to continue your gameplay. And I feel like this takes something away from the experience. Let's face it, games are simply more enjoyable when you're sharing the experience with awesome people. With that being said, there's also a certain satisfaction in accomplishing things on your own. I vividly recall the struggle of trying to progress without my guild when I first dove into the game. It was incredibly frustrating being weak and clueless, with no one to turn to for advice, especially considering how intricate this game can be for a mobile app. I could see why people who struggle to make friends would rage quit, which is bad for the devs who want to keep the game alive. It was also harder back then because the gear cap was so low. 27 and then 30 costs were beastly for quite some time back then. So arguably, at the cost of friendship, the devs made the game more accessible to a wider player base by holding their hands a little longer than they used to, and by making the game more solo and user-friendly over the years. And yet, despite these numerous changes and the changes I imagine are still to come, the game feels stale. This stems from my belief that people expect video games to be static, to always tell the same story and to stay the same. Yes, there are some exceptions to this rule now, but often video games have linear storylines that never change, a single path you are meant to follow. While mobile games, on the other hand, are games you expect to maintain elements of their origins while also evolving over time. Even though we've seen the introduction of new enemies, monsters, new classes, new abilities, even though we may have to change our ability sets and even our gear to make it through a specific quest that would prove troublesome otherwise, Unison League's gameplay boils down to the same thing no matter what you're doing. You pick your class, you spawn in or take part in events to acquire gear to make your character more beastly. You probably completely ignore the tutorial and storyline because tutorials are gross and that's too much reading, and you head into these events and other quests, where the monsters might change and they might challenge you by inflicting you with different debuffs, status ailments while dealing damage. But ultimately, you are still doing the same thing no matter what situation you find yourself in, healing, protecting, and buffing your allies if you're a support class, and kicking butt if you're a DPS. Nothing really changes even if the game's landscape seems to be shifting all around you. One day you may find yourself in a forest, the next a castle. One day you may be fighting angels and the next some demonic entity, as power steadily creeps all around you. But no matter the case, you're always staring at little anime-style characters on a screen and pressing buttons whenever you have the cost and your abilities have cooled down. And once you realize this and begin to notice the patterns that envelop this game, patterns pertaining to when certain spawns and events come out, the game really loses its luster. It was at this point that I began to feel burnt out that I began to struggle with my motivation to keep playing and struggling to keep up with power creep and the host of new and recycled events that the game presented me with and whatever else it may decide to throw at me. It was at this point that I began to realize that while I may have liked what the game once was, and its aesthetic, I wasn't particularly fond of where it is now. While I wouldn't say that I've grown to hate the game, it's clear that I don't appreciate it quite like I used to. I still log in fairly regularly, mainly to admire the new monsters and design, and build up login bonuses if I ever decide to really start playing again, but I honestly don't know if that'll ever happen, even if I never decide to truly go back, if you will. I'm glad this was a game I got to experience, because as cliche as it may sound, I'm glad I made so many friends along the way, and I look forward to our future gaming experiences. And there you have it, my discussion of the Unison League veteran experience, which is basically watching an old friend grow up, while also feeling like they've stayed the same, haven't really changed, and realizing that while you still admire them, you're just not as close as you used to be. What do you think of my experience? Do you feel the same, or is your experience different than mine? Let me know down below in the comments. I always like to know what you kings, queens, and in-betweens think. And if you like what you saw here today, please smash that like button until it's blue, subscribe, ring that bell so you'll always know what's up, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye guys!
Hi, Tisha Valenza, aka Poison Ivy, and you've just been watching King's Entertainment Reviews. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and watch.